Okay, I know that Tartaglia is not from Leeway, so don't scream at me. But he did become a playable character in the Leeway arc, and was first introduced in the Leeway arc. So it makes sense to talk about him when we go over Leeway characters, and so with that out of the way, here is our Childe, which I'm going to be calling him here on out so I don't butcher his real name. That's for those who are watching the YouTube video. So let's get started. Tartaglia, also known by his codename Childe, is a playable Hydro character in Genshin Impact. He is the 11th out of the 11 Fatui Harbingers, following danger whenever he goes. Childe is always eager for a challenge, making him extremely dangerous despite being the youngest member. His real name is Ajax, a male character in Genshin Impact. His weapon is a bow and his vision is Hydro. His birthday is July 20th, and his constellation is Monoceros Kelly. Childe comes from Tartaglia. He has two affiliations. One is that with the Fatui, and the 11th of the 11 Fatui Harbingers. His special dish is a prize catch, which is a variant of calla lily seafood soup. Childe became a playable character on November 11th, 2020. Oh hey, that day was only 2 days ago from this recording. And also Veterans Day in the US. Neat! The 4 voice actors of our sketchy Fatui are Griffin Burns in English, Yudon in Chinese, Kimura Rohei in Japanese, and Nam Dong-hyung in Korean. Tartaglia goes by 2 titles, his codename Childe and the 11th of the 11 Fatui Harbingers. Childe is a tall young man with short orange hair and dark blue eyes. He wears a red Fatui mask pulled off to the one side of his head. He also wears a beaded earring with a red crystal on his left ear. A few lighter blonde streaks can be seen in his hair, with one prominent one on the left side of his bangs. He wears a gray jacket that is left unbuttoned at the end to reveal a belt, which his Hydro Vision is attached to. He also wears a red banner that glows across his chest and over his left shoulder, which becomes unfused with a wispy Hydro effect when the meal status of his elemental skill, Foul Legacy Riding Tide, is activated. His outfit, Blades of Glory, is described to be illuminous attire to significate Childe's position as the 11th Fatui Harbinger. During the Golden House battle, Childe wears his electoral delusion to the right of his vision, in the center of his belt, and then moves his vision to the empty slot on his right chest, when fully activating the Foul Legacy transformation. Childe describes himself as kind of a bad guy, living for the thrill of a fight and causing chaos. As a kid, Childe was frightened and hesitant, but he secretly desired to become an adventurer, like the ones his father told him about as they fished together. After falling into the abyss and meeting the training with Skirt, Childe's personality drastically changed. Although he appears to be relatively friendly on the surface, Childe is a bloodthirsty warrior. The Abyss and his old master, Shirk, made him self-confident, solipsistic, and brash, driving for the sensation of being alive. A warrior at heart, he constantly seeks the ways to grow stronger, regardless of how he attains said power. Childe considers those who wish to become strong like him to be friends, and takes pleasure in battling them on the battlefield. He lusts for combat, and grows excited by defeating strong opponents, even if it could mean dying in the process. He uses bows because he is the weakest with them, making his victories with them all the more exhilarating. Because of his pride, Childe is expectantly reliable by accomplishing the tasks given to him, no matter how difficult they may be or if they go against his values. This, combined with the straightforward nature, makes him rather easy to manipulate, despite disliking how his plan in Liyue Harbor could potentially harm innocents. He puts it into motion to fulfill his mission in Liyue, only to learn he was meant to fail as part of an even larger plan he was not privy to, much to his consideration. Amongst the rest of the Harbingers, Childe is considered an oddball. While his fellow Harbingers preferred clandestine operations and staying behind the scenes, Childe favors being front and center. He is a public figure known for attending social gatherings and even participates as an actor in plays and theater. As a result, Childe's co-workers are wary of him, while he holds them in disdain for their schemes and integrable methods. While he is easily capable of scheming, he only resorts to such approaches when necessary due to his straightforward nature. He also appears to treat his subordinates less harshly than the rest of the Harbingers, stating that he doesn't use lethal force against the recruits in his care, nor does he threaten any of them. Childe delegates himself to those he cares about wholeheartedly. He is unquestionably loyal to the Teresa and holds her in high esteem. Seeing himself as her weapon of war, he also cares deeply for his family. He sends mostly money, gifts, and letters home often. Childe is expectantly proud of his 3 younger siblings and dotes on them frequently, especially his younger brother, Trucer. He is willing to lie and even put himself in mortal danger, so as long as to make him happy, although he was once on good terms with Zhongli, even allowing the former Archon to use him as financial support. He seems to have taken his description personally, stating he will only forgive him if he agrees to trial by combat. Zhongli appears to be unaware of Childe's change in option, being under the impression he will still meet him for drinks to catch up after the recent Liyue events. Cutting Torrent is Childe's normal attack. The normal attack performs up to 6 consecutive shots with a bow. The charge attack will perform a more precise aim shot with increased damage. While aiming, the power of Hydra will accumulate on the arrowhead. An arrow fully charged with the torrent will deal Hydra damage and apply the arrow with Riptide status. With Riptide, opponents affected by Riptide will suffer from AoE Hydra damage. Effects when attacked by Childe in various ways. Damage dealt in this way will consider damage attack normal. 2 versions of Riptide are Flash and Burst. Riptide Flash, a fully charged aim shot that hits an opponent. Effects by Riptide deals constructive bouts of AoE damage. Can occur once every 1.7 seconds. Riptide Burst, defeating the opponent effect by Riptide, creates a Hydro Burst that inflicts the Riptide status on nearby opponent's hit. And the plunging attack flies off a shower of arrows in mid-air before falling and striking the ground, dealing AoE damage upon impact. But when Childe is on Foul Legacy Raging Tide meal state, he cannot perform a plunging attack. Foul Legacy Raging Tide is Childe's elemental skill. Unleashes a set of weaponry made of pure water, dealing Hydra damage to surrounding opponents and entering melee state. In this stance, Child's normal and charge attacks are converted to hydro damage that cannot be overwritten by other elemental infusion and charge as follows. The normal attack performs up to 6 constructive hydro strikes. Charge attack consumes a certain amount of stamina to unleash a cross slash dealing hydro damage. And with Riptide Slash, hitting an opponent affected by Riptide with a melee attack unleashes a Riptide Slash that deals AoE hydro damage. Damage dealt in the way considered elemental skill damage can only occur once every 1.5 seconds. After the 30 seconds, or when the ability is unleashed again, the skill will end. Child will return to his range status, and this ability will enter the CD. The child no stands in the melee stance. The longer the CD, if the return is the range stance, occurs automatically after 30 seconds, the CD is even longer. Havoc Obliteration is Child's elemental burst, performs different attacks based on what status Child is in when casting. One is range status Flash of Havoc. It swiftly fires a hydro-imbued magic arrow, dealing AoE hydro damage and applying the Riptide status, returns a position of its energy cost after use. Next is Melee Stance, Light of Obliteration, which performs a slash with a large AoE, dealing massive hydro damage to all surrounding opponents, which triggers Riptide Blast. With Riptide Blast, when the obliterating waters hit the opponent affected by Riptide, it clears their Riptide status and triggers a Hydro Explosion that deals AoE hydro damage. Damage dealt in this way is considered elemental burst damage. Never Ending is Child's first ascension passive skill. Extends Riptide duration by 8 seconds. Swords of Torrents is Child's first ascension passive skill. Force Ascension. When Child is in a Foul Legacy Raising Tide melee stance on dealing a crit damage, normal and charge attacks applied to the Riptide stacks affect 2 opponents. Master of Weaponry is Child's utility passive skill. It increases your own party member's normal attack level by 1. Despite holding one of the most senior positions in the Fatui as one of the 11 Harbingers, Child very much looks like the young adult that he is. He is a wolf in sheep's clothing, however, from under the cheerful and confident appearance lies a deadlier swordsman. He is the youngest among the Harbingers, but one of the most dangerous among their number. That said, Child doesn't seem to fit in well with the others. As a fighter, first and foremost, he is quite at odds with the organization of deceit and treachery. As the youngest Harbinger in the history of the Fatui, Child is hardly bound by conversation, and plays by his own rules accordingly. Though this lone wolf is not so well received by his peers, and is also at odds with their methods. His clever demeanor hides a responsible, watertight maliciousness. He is a proud man of his word. Even if the promise he makes is absurd, he will never break it. But it is exterminating all the dragons inside their lairs, venturing into a domain of extreme danger, or single-handedly overthrowing the territory of a nobleman. He not only keeps his promises, but does so with finance and surgical precision. And as the Harbinger's vanguard, Child always appears in the vulnerable underbellies of Chesnaya's enemy states, striking as a conflict is about to erupt. Many myths in Chesnaya say that Child has been on the battlefield since he was 14 years old. Oddly enough, at that young age, he already seemed to be a skilled slaughterer, with the mastery of many forms of martial arts. But more terrifying than his skill in combat was his passion for it. Perilous battles would only excite him, and terrifying foes would exhilarate him all the more. Childe's arrogance and consent are divided from honing himself across the countless battles and from unmatched combat experience. On the other hand, because they fret about the way his quarrelsome personality tends to invade unwanted trouble, the other Harbingers constantly try to get him sent on missions to places as far from Cesnaya as possible, so that they can avoid the fallout. The man is incommensurably even in the eye of a storm, and these unusual experiences have also made him quite the show-off who reveals in the precise of others. Unlike other members of the Harbingers who prefer to keep a low profile, Childe will often go to watch public performances, occasionally if becoming part of the show himself. Ice fishing has been one of Childe's hobbies since childhood. In those days, he was often known by names of Tartaglia or Childe as the Fatui calls him, but as Ajax, named by his father after some hero's tale. He and his father would cut holes open in frozen lakes before sitting beside them and tending to their fishing lines. This is also no easy task and would sometimes take the entire morning, but whenever it was chiseling away at the thick ice or the long waits in between catches, he was always accomplished by his father's unending tales of adventure. These are the stories of his father's adventures from when he was young, and they became the future the child secretly envisioned himself. So he would pay close attention, putting himself into the shoes of the protagonists of those tales, immersing himself fully in them even as they waited for a fish to bite. Even after leaving home, Ajax, later known as Childe Tartaglia, would keep up this hobby of his. No longer accomplished by the stories of bygone days, fishing instead became an opportunity to train, to hone his endurance and reflect on combat techniques. Such long periods of meditation to refine his skills swiftly re-legended the question of an successful catch in relevance. Unlike the rest of the world may think, Childe was not born with his exceptional skills in battle. But he would never speak to anyone about his critical, fateful encounter of his. When he was 14, he fled to his monotonous life at home with nothing but a short sword and a bag of bread in hand. The 14-year-old boy got lost in the snowy forest. Pursued by bears and wolf packs, he lost his footing and fell into a bottomless crack in the Earth's surface. There he witnessed endless possibilities of another ancient world. There he would meet a mysterious swordsman, or perhaps one should say the dark realm had sensed the burning ambition in this boy's heart. This darkness was something that the Harbinger Childe would never again delve into. In those 3 months, this swordsman taught Tartaglia how to pass through the abyss, unhinged and more importantly, nurtured by the ability to stir up endless havoc within Ajax's troubled morning nature. No one knew what happened within the darkness during those 3 months, nor would Ajax ever speak to anyone about this. When his worried mother and sisters finally found him in the forest, only 3 days had passed in this world. Thus did Ajax's first adventure end, and with now rusty swords in hand, this would mark the end of his youth and the beginning of his days as a warrior. By the time that he returned home, the young man was no longer the same. He was no longer frightened and hesitant, but had become furious and confident. He acted as if the world revolved around him, and if battle existed for this sake. Confidence often brings about change, and his capitalist incalculable change attracted Ajax like a revolving kaleidoscope. In the eyes of his father, the third son that he had been so worried about had changed for the worse. bringing much uncalled for havoc to the seaside village of Maripezak, or perhaps it would be more accurate to say that Ajax had become a nexus of strife. For no matter where he went, fights and squabbles would follow, and he reveled in it. Ultimately, after a huge brawl was precise with some difficulty and with some near-fatal misses, his father had no choice but to hand his beloved son over to compassion into the Fatui. He had hoped that the strict military training of the Fatui could horn his son's temper, but would wound up watching fully aimed troops getting the strifing beaten out of them by a mere child. This was a great disappointment to his father, but it also caught the attention of Pulcinella, the fifth harbinger. Shocked by Ajax's great strength and curious about how he invulnerably became the eye of a vortex of discord, Pulcinella inducted Ajax into the Fatui under the pretext of meting out punishment, ordering him to start from the bottom and take up the duty of serving the Teresa. His insatiable desire for conquest would thus be constantly straightened in fighting for the Fatui, and his ever-belonging ego would go upon the elation of vanquishing mighty foes. Until at last Ajax was chosen to be one of the Fatui harbingers, daunting the mantle of Childe Tartaglia and becoming one of the most powerful people in Cesnaya. But becoming Childe was far from his end goal. To someone who sought to conquer the world, this was more of a tiny step in his journey. Dearest sisters, are you all keeping well at home? Has the old man's headache gotten any better? Please send my regards to our parents and our siblings. I've sent some wine-chained medication over from Leeway Harbor. It's very effective and it will probably keep him from nagging for a while. It should reach you after a few days. Apart from our father's affairs, I naturally haven't forgotten about gifts for all of you. This letter should come with 2 kites from Leeway, a rather dumb to porcelain dolls from Inzuma, and a crate for various snacks. And please break it to Aton that the residents of Leeway are just boring, old, ordinary humans like us. They're not made of stone, and they don't even eat stones. Do not fret for my sake, Tanya, and refrain from making trouble for anyone at home. I will be home soon, when I have seized the 7 stars of Leeway and led them out of the fleet of Her Majesty the Teresa. I will take the first ship home, just as I promised, and you know how I always keep my promises. Your faithfully loyal knight. Charles' disillusion is his old badge of honor, and the proof of his strength. He still remembers with perfect clarity the day when he received his delusion and ascended to become a member of the Harbingers. As soon he stood before the cold, stern Teresa, the jester, the very first of the Fatui personally pinned with this insignia onto him. It was his renown for slaying many terrible beasts and the memento of countless battles. But it was not this first time Teresa joyed for this natural reward of the warrior, nor did he pay any mind to the odd looks of his new colleagues gave him, for the opinions and bellyaches of others meant nothing to him. The sight of the Teresa on her lofty throne alone stirred the young man's heart in respect and admiration, not merely because she opened the way for him to find the abundance of looming battles, but also because of the way she looked upon him. Her gaze was cold but pure, arrogant yet sharp. She was not only the Esophageal Quio Archon, but also a true warrior. Thus, the child, having received his delusion, swear an oath of flatantly to the one and only Teresa of Cesnaya. In some commedia dell'arte, an early form of professional theater originating from Italy, Tartaglia is a stock character. Unlike some other stock characters, his role in the story typically varies, but He is distinguished by his farce in stutter. The alias he is given to the party is translated differently across various versions because Tartaglia is his name. Languages that use commandia names for the other Harbingers' aliases had to use a different alias for him. His English alias, Childe, is a direct translation of the Chinese alias. Childe is an authentic English word that refers to the son of a nobleman who has not yet attended knighthood. In Chinese, he introduces himself as Childe, which is Gongzi, meaning young nobleman. The commandia names was always translated into Chinese when used as an alias, so there is no overlap between his aliases and his Italian commandia name. In Japanese, he introduces himself as Tartaglia before telling the traveler to call him Childe. Koshi, meaning young nobleman. While his name appears as Tartaglia on the dialogue boxes, all over other characters call him Childe. Like in Chinese, the commandia names are always translated into Japanese when used as an alias. In French, Childe always refers to himself as Tartaglia and never uses his alias, Jean Sire, which is a direct translate of the Chinese. In German, his alias is translated as Graf, which means Earl. His constellation Manassas Caeli can be interpreted as Latin for celestial narwhal. The scientific name of the narwhal is Monodal marcellus. However, the Chinese name for his constellation means whale sky constellation. Traditionally, in mythology, Manassas translates to unicorn, with the moral lily translating to one horn, and his birth name Ajax comes from the ancient Greek Aias. Fact 1. Childe comes from a large family with an ambiguous number of siblings, most likely 2 older brothers and at least 1 older sister, and 3 younger siblings, Tanya, Eton, and Trucer, with Trucer being the youngest. In the official English character introduction, Tanya boasts that he can cook and clean and is the bestest big brother ever. Childe's birth name Ajax is derived from the Greek mythological figure Ajax the Great, a warrior who participated in the Trojan War, known as resistant strong lancer. Truce was Ajax the Great's brother, youngest half, an archer who fought alongside Ajax. Childe's weakness with bows and preference to melee weapons may be a reference to the mythological Ajax's strength in spears, while Trucer was more or like skilled in archery. Fact 2. Despite being the first playable Sejnian character, Childe is located under the Leeway Harbor selection of the official website, as this is the region the player meets him in. Kadahar Kazuya, the first playable Izunuman character, received the same treatment as he joined Beto's Quex fleet, some time before the player meets him, though as of the release of Inazuma, Kazuha has been moved to the Inazuma section. Fact 3. He is the first character to be both a playable character and a boss. Fact 4. Tartaglia is only bow wielder to hold his bow with his right hand and draw with his left, in the character's screen indicating he could be left-handed. Fact 5. Tartaglia has no shine in his eyes, unlike the other playable characters. And fact 6. Despite hailing from Sejnia and makes his first appearance in Leeway, Childe uses Mondstadt talent books. And that, guys, is Childe. If you got a problem with me using his codename, that's your business, and I can understand that. But with Childe done, along with all the Leeway characters, I can move on to Izunuma's characters. And I'll start with A. And that person who is the first is our Oni friend, Arataki Ito. So see you later.